You need to move to the basement, Marcus. Or we can look at assisted living facilities nearby. Either way, the upstairs bedrooms are being converted. My daughter-in-law Victoria stood in the doorway of what used to be my wife's sewing room, her arms crossed, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who's made a decision and doesn't expect resistance. I looked up from the photo album in my lap. Pictures of Caroline and me at our wedding. Her in the garden she'd planted behind our first house. Ethan as a baby in the cradle I'd built in the garage workshop. I see, I said quietly. Victoria shifted her weight, clearly expecting more of a reaction. It's not personal, Marcus. We just need the space. Ethan's been working from home more, and I need a proper home office. The basement has that nice rec room area. You'd have your own bathroom down there. Or assisted living, I repeated. Well, yes. I mean, you're 72. At some point, it makes sense to have professional care available. There's a lovely place just 15 minutes away. They have activities, meals prepared, nursing staff on call. I closed the album gently, my fingers tracing Caroline's face one more time. You're right, I said, and I smiled. I'll make arrangements. Victoria blinked, clearly thrown by how easy that was. Oh, well, good. I mean, thank you for being so understanding. She hesitated in the doorway. Ethan will be glad you're being reasonable about this. After she left, I sat there for a long moment in the afternoon light. This house, Caroline and I had saved for 3 years to afford the down payment. We'd moved in when Ethan was 8 in 1992. I'd spent countless evenings in the garage, building furniture, fixing neighbors' broken appliances for extra money. Caroline had sewn curtains for every window, planted the garden that still bloomed every spring. When she died 5 years ago, the grief nearly took me under. But I'd promised her I'd look after Ethan, make sure he had security. So I'd signed the house over to him. Your inheritance, I'd told him at the lawyer's office. Your mother and I wanted you to have something solid. I hadn't mentioned the other properties. The business. Caroline and I had agreed years ago that Ethan needed to make his own way first, build his own life without the shadow of wealth hanging over him. We'd lived modestly, deliberately. I'd worked construction, then carpentry, building a reputation as a reliable handyman. Ethan grew up seeing his father as a skilled tradesman who earned an honest living. He never knew about Harrington Spirits, the craft distillery I'd started in 1985 with money from my grandfather's estate. Small batch bourbon and rye whiskey that had quietly built a reputation among collectors and high-end restaurants. Caroline had managed the books from home for years, keeping it separate from our family life. We'd made enough to invest in property, to build wealth slowly and carefully. But we'd wanted Ethan to understand the value of work, to respect the people who built things with their hands, to never take anything for granted. I thought he'd learned those lessons. I'd watched him graduate from college, start his career in marketing, work his way up. He'd met Victoria at an industry conference. She came from money, old family wealth, and I'd seen the way Ethan changed around her, standing a little straighter, talking about brands and luxury goods, ordering wine he couldn't pronounce. Still, he seemed happy. And when Caroline got sick, Ethan had been there, held his mother's hand, helped me make the funeral arrangements. I'd signed the house over to him 6 months after Caroline died, wanting to give him something tangible from the life his mother and I had built. Now, 2 years later, here I was being offered the basement or assisted living. I pulled out my phone and called Eleanor Hayes. Marcus! Her warm voice came through immediately. I was just thinking about you. How are you doing? Eleanor, I think it's time I came back full-time. A pause. Are you sure? You said you wanted to stay close to Ethan, especially after Caroline. Plans change. Can you arrange for someone to pick me up Friday morning? I'll need help with some boxes. Of course. I'll drive up myself. Marcus, is everything all right? I looked around the room, Caroline's paintings still on the walls, the bookshelf I'd built, the window seat where she used to read. Everything's fine, I said. I'm just ready to come home. That evening, Ethan came home from work to find me packing. He stood in my doorway, loosening his tie, his face carefully neutral. Victoria told me, "You're being really good about the basement idea," he said. I folded another sweater into the box. "Actually, I've decided to make other arrangements." His eyebrows rose. "Assisted living? Dad, you don't have to rush into that. The basement really would be—" "I'm not going to assisted living, Ethan." I turned to face him. "I have a place upstate. I'll be moving there." "Upstate? What place? I didn't know you had. Do you mean renting something?" "No, son. I own it." Confusion crossed his face. "You own property upstate? Since when?" "A long time. Your mother and I— well, it's a complicated story." I taped up the box. "But it's time I went back. I don't understand. How can you afford—" He stopped himself. "Sorry. I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. It's fine." I met his eyes. "You've always thought of me as just a handyman, someone who scraped by. That was intentional, Ethan. Your mother and I wanted you to learn the value of work, not grow up entitled." "Dad, what are you talking about?" "You'll see soon enough." I returned to packing. "Someone's coming Friday morning to help me move. You and Victoria don't need to worry about anything." He stood there for a long moment. I could feel him wanting to ask more questions, but something stopped him. Maybe pride, maybe guilt, maybe both. "If you need anything," he finally said, "just call." "I will. Thank you, son." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed Caroline and I had shared for 40 years. The bed I'd built from reclaimed oak. I could almost feel her hand in mine. "Time to stop pretending, love," I whispered. Time to let him see the truth. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I'd been up since 5, finishing the last of the packing. Most of my clothes, Caroline's photo albums, my tools from the garage. The rest could stay. It had always been Ethan's house anyway. At 8:30, I heard the vehicle pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw Eleanor Hayes stepping out of a silver Range Rover. She was dressed in her usual professional style, but her face lit up when she saw me at the door. "Marcus, let me look at you." She climbed the porch steps and pulled me into a quick hug. "Too skinny. Are they not feeding you?" "I feed myself just fine, Eleanor." "Well, Clara's been cooking for a week, preparing for your return. The staff is excited." "How are things at the distillery?" "Running like clockwork, as always, though we've missed having you around for the big decisions." She glanced past me into the house. "Is Ethan home? I'd love to meet him finally." "He's at work. Victoria's at her yoga class." Something flickered in Eleanor's expression. "I see. Well, let's get you loaded up." We worked efficiently, carrying boxes to the Range Rover. I was sealing the last one when I heard a car door slam. Victoria's white BMW sat in the driveway beside Eleanor's vehicle. "Marcus?" Victoria walked up the driveway, yoga mat under her arm, staring at the Range Rover with its Massachusetts plates. "What's going on? Whose car is this?" "This is Eleanor Hayes," I said. "She's helping me move." Victoria's eyes swept over Eleanor, taking in the expensive watch, the designer bag, the quality of her clothes. "Move? Today? I thought we agreed you'd take some time to—" "You made the decision," I said gently. "I'm simply following through." Eleanor extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Victoria. I've heard so much about you." Victoria shook it automatically, her mind clearly racing. "I'm sorry. How do you know, Marcus?" "Eleanor manages my property upstate," I said. "Property manager?" Victoria's tone shifted slightly, the way it did when she was recalibrating someone's importance. "Well, it's very kind of you to help Marcus with his move. Though I'm not sure we discussed the timeline." "The timeline is now," I said. "Everything's packed. I'll leave my key on the kitchen counter." "Your key? Marcus, this is still your home. You don't have to. It's Ethan's home. You've made that clear." I picked up the last box. "Tell my son I'll call him once I'm settled." I walked past her to the Range Rover. Eleanor followed, giving Victoria a polite nod. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw Victoria on her phone, probably calling Ethan. "She seems lovely," Eleanor said dryly. "She's young, ambitious, doesn't understand yet that money doesn't equal worth." We drove north in comfortable silence. The city gave way to suburbs, then rolling hills. Eleanor caught me up on business. Production numbers, distribution, expansion. The bourbon we'd aged for 15 years that was finally ready for release. Collectors are already asking about it, she said. We could get 800 a bottle, easily. Caroline would have loved that. She always said the 15-year was our masterpiece. She was right. Eleanor glanced at me. You know the estate's been lonely without you, Marcus. The cottage feels empty. I'm ready to be back, these past 2 years. I thought staying close to Ethan was what Caroline would have wanted, but I don't think she'd want me living in a basement either. 2 hours later, we turned off the highway onto a private road. Trees lined both sides, their leaves turning gold and red. Another mile, and we reached the gate. Eleanor punched in the code, and the iron gate swung open to reveal the grounds. Harrington Estate stretched across 200 acres of pristine New England landscape. The main house, a renovated 1890s manor, sat at the top of a gentle rise. Below it, the distillery buildings. Beyond those, the warehouses where thousands of barrels aged slowly in temperature-controlled darkness. Staff cottages dotted the property. Gardens, a small pond. Home, I breathed. We drove past the main house to the cottage where Caroline and I had lived when we worked on site. Someone had planted new flowers in the boxes she'd installed. The porch had been freshly painted. The staff wanted everything perfect for your return, Eleanor said. Before I could respond, people began emerging from the buildings. James from maintenance, Clara from the kitchen, the distillery workers, production managers, warehouse staff. They lined up along the path, applauding as Eleanor parked. "Welcome back, Mr. Harrington," someone called. I stepped out of the vehicle, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to do all this." "Are you kidding?" Clara bustled forward, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your family, Marcus. Welcome home." The next few hours passed in a blur of hugs, conversations, and catching up. I toured the distillery, running my hands over the copper stills Caroline and I had designed. Visited the warehouses where our bourbon aged in charred oak barrels. Checked the bottling line, where we'd recently expanded capacity. "Production's up 18% year over year," Eleanor reported as we stood in the tasting room. "Revenue's strong. We're getting requests from restaurants and distributors we never could have cracked 5 years ago." "Caroline's work," I said. "She spent decades building relationships, and you spent decades perfecting the product. That's why it works." Eleanor poured us both a taste of the 12-year rye. "To Caroline, and to having you back where you belong." We clinked glasses. The whiskey burned, smooth and perfect. That evening, I sat on my cottage porch, watching the sun set over the estate. My phone rang. "Ethan." "Dad?" "Victoria said you left today. She said some woman picked you up." "Eleanor Hayes, my estate manager." "Estate manager?" "Dad, what is going on?" "Victoria said the woman was driving a Range Rover, wearing a Rolex." "That doesn't make any sense." "It makes perfect sense, Ethan. I own a business upstate. Always have. Your mother and I ran it together." Silence. Then, "What kind of business?" "A distillery. Harrington Spirits. Small batch bourbon and rye whiskey." More silence. I could almost hear his mind working. "Harrington Spirits?" "Dad, I've seen that brand. We served it at my company's executive dinner last year. That's expensive stuff." "Yes." "You own it? You're saying you've owned a luxury whiskey brand this whole time, and you never told me?" "That's correct. I don't." "Why? How? When did this happen?" "I started the business in 1985. Your mother managed it with me for 30 years. We kept it separate from our family life because we wanted you to grow up normal. To understand hard work and humility. You let me think you were just a handyman. You let me worry about your finances. You let me." He stopped. "You let me and Victoria treat you like you needed our charity." "I never asked for charity, son." "No, but you lived in our house. You let us." "God, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you just tell me?" "Would it have changed anything?" I asked gently. "If you'd known I had money, would you have respected me more? Treated me better?" The silence stretched long. "I need to see this place," he finally said. "Can I come up?" "Of course. I'll text you the address." "Dad, I'm I'm sorry. About the basement. About everything. We'll talk when you get here. Drive safely. I ended the call and sat back in my chair. The estate lights were coming on across the property, warm glows in the gathering darkness. Caroline's spirit felt close, like she was sitting beside me. He's coming, love, I said to the air. Time for him to understand. Ethan arrived the next morning, his Lexus looking out of place on the rural road. I watched from the cottage porch as he drove through the gates, his head swiveling to take in the manor house, the distillery buildings, the manicured grounds. He parked and sat in his car for a full minute, staring. Finally, he climbed out, stood there looking at everything. At the sign on the nearest building, Harrington Spirits, Est, 1985. Dad? I walked down to meet him. Welcome to the estate. You own all of this? Yes. The distillery, the buildings, the land, all of it. 200 acres. The manor house dates to 1892. Your mother and I renovated it when we bought the property. Ethan turned in a slow circle. I don't understand. How did you afford this? How did you keep it secret? My grandfather left me an inheritance when I was 25. Not a fortune, but enough to start. Your mother and I lived frugally, invested wisely, built the business slowly. By the time you were born, we were profitable. By the time you went to college, we were successful. But you worked construction. You fixed people's sinks and built furniture in the garage. I enjoyed that work, still do. But I also ran this business. Your mother handled most of the day-to-day operations from home. I came here twice a week, stayed in the cottage, oversaw production. You thought I was doing carpentry jobs out of town. He sat down heavily on the cottage steps. Why lie? We didn't lie, Ethan. We just didn't tell you everything. I sat beside him. Your mother grew up wealthy. Her family had money, but they were miserable, entitled, cruel to anyone they saw as beneath them. She swore she'd never raise a child that way. Mom came from money, but Grandma and Grandpa lived in that little apartment. They lost everything in a bad investment when your mother was 20. She saw how their rich friends abandoned them, how people who'd kissed up to them suddenly wouldn't return their calls. It shaped everything she believed about money and character. So you deliberately raised me to think we were poor, not poor, middle class, comfortable but not wealthy. We wanted you to understand work, to respect people for what they did, not what they owned, to build relationships based on character, not money. Did it work? His voice was bitter. Because I just spent the last 2 years letting Victoria push you around. I let her turn my father into a charity case in his own house. The house you gave me. The house your mother and I bought and signed over to you? Yes. He put his head in his hands. I'm such an idiot. You're human. You fell in love with a woman from wealth, and you wanted to impress her family. I understand that, Ethan. But somewhere along the way, you forgot what really matters. Victoria's going to die when she finds out. She's been, God, Dad. The things she said about you, about old people being burdens, about how her parents would never live with them, and I just let her say it. What does Victoria know about her parents now? He looked up. What do you mean? Are her parents still supporting her? No. They cut her off last year. Said she was too materialistic, needed to learn to live within our means. It's been a sore point. She feels like they betrayed her. Maybe they were trying to teach her the same lesson your mother and I tried to teach you. We sat in silence for a while. A worker walked past, nodded respectfully. Morning, Mr. Harrington. Morning, James. Ethan watched the exchange. Everyone here calls you Mr. Harrington. It's my business. They're my employees. How many people work here? 42 full-time. Another 20 part-time during peak production seasons. And you've been running this while letting me think you were just my dad who fixed things. I am just your dad who fixes things. I'm also a businessman. People are more than one thing, Ethan. Eleanor found us an hour later, after I'd given Ethan a tour of the distillery. He'd been quiet, absorbing everything. The copper stills, the aging warehouses, the bottling line, the tasting room where we received buyers and restaurant owners. You must be Ethan, Eleanor said, shaking his hand. I've heard so much about you over the years. I wish I could say the same, Ethan said. But apparently there's a lot about my father's life I knew nothing about. Your parents were very private about the business, Eleanor said diplomatically. But Marcus talked about you constantly. He was so proud when you graduated, when you got your first promotion, when you got married. Proud enough to not tell me the truth. Proud enough to want you to succeed on your own merits, I corrected. Ethan, what would you have done if you'd known? Would you have worked as hard in school? Would you have taken that entry-level marketing job? Or would you have asked me for money? Asked me to get you a cushy position somewhere through my business connections? He didn't answer. Your mother and I gave you something more valuable than money, I continued. We gave you the knowledge that you earned everything yourself, that your success came from your effort, your intelligence, your determination. No one can ever take that away from you. Even if I threw it away by caring more about impressing Victoria's parents than taking care of my own father, you didn't throw anything away. You made mistakes. You can learn from them. Eleanor cleared her throat. Marcus, we have the quarterly board meeting this afternoon. Will you be joining? Board meeting? Ethan looked between us. Harrington Spirits operates with a board of directors, Eleanor explained. Marcus as founder and majority shareholder, myself as COO, and 3 external members with expertise in distribution, finance, and operations. A board of directors, Ethan repeated numbly. It's a real company, son. With structure, governance, employees, responsibilities. Your mother and I built something meaningful, something that will last. Ethan sat through the board meeting, silent in the back of the room. I watched him absorb the discussions about production capacity, distribution partnerships, revenue projections. The respect the board members showed me, the authority with which I spoke about the business. Afterward, as we walked back to the cottage, he said, I need to go home. I need to talk to Victoria. What will you tell her? The truth. That I've been an idiot. That I let her treat you like a burden when you were anything but. That I need to figure out what actually matters in my life. Be kind, I said. She's young, like you. Still learning. You're being very generous, considering she tried to stick you in the basement. I'm old enough to know that people grow, change, learn. Your mother wasn't always wise about money and character. She learned it through pain. Give Victoria a chance to learn too. He hugged me before he left, holding on longer than he had in years. I love you, Dad, and I'm sorry. I love you too, son. Drive safely. I watched his car disappear down the drive, then returned to the cottage. There was work to do, a business to run, a life to live. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt at peace. 3 weeks later, my phone rang on a Saturday morning. Ethan, Dad, is that offer still open? The one about the guest cottage? Of course. What's happening? Victoria and I have been talking a lot about priorities, about what we want our life to look like, and we think we'd like to try something different. If you're willing, I'm listening. I want to learn the business, the real work, from the ground up. Victoria wants to learn too. We'd like to move into the guest cottage, work at the distillery, not as your son being given a handout, but as actual employees, learning the craft. I was quiet for a moment, emotion tightening my throat. Your mother would be so happy to hear that. I know I don't deserve the chance, not after how we treated you. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. When can you start? They arrived 2 weeks later with a moving truck containing far less than they'd owned before. Victoria looked nervous as she climbed out, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a simple sweater. Mr. Harrington, she said, extending her hand. I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. The way I spoke to you, the way I treated you in your own home. There's no excuse. I took her hand and pulled her into a hug. Family doesn't hold grudges, Victoria. Welcome home. She broke down crying on my shoulder. Ethan stood beside us, his own eyes wet. Thank you, Dad, he whispered. Over the following months, I watched them transform. Ethan started in the warehouse, learning how we selected barrels, monitored aging, checked temperatures. Victoria worked with Clara in the administrative office, understanding the business side. They lived in the guest cottage, cooked their own meals, learned to budget without her parents' money or his marketing salary. They worked hard, asked questions, made mistakes, and learned from them. One evening, 6 months after they'd arrived, the three of us sat on my cottage porch watching the sunset. The same view Caroline and I had shared for decades. "I get it now," Ethan said quietly. "Why you and Mom did things the way you did. This work, this life, it's real. It matters. Not because of the money, but because we're creating something, contributing something." "Your mother understood that from the beginning," I said. "She saw how hollow wealth could be without purpose, without work, without connection with something meaningful." Victoria leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "My parents called today. They want to visit. They heard about us working here, living differently. Mom said she was proud." "That's good," I said. "Families should be proud of each other. I'm proud of us," Ethan said. "Of trying to do better, be better. Your mother would be proud too." The sun set in brilliant oranges and reds, painting the distillery buildings in warm light. Somewhere in the warehouses, thousands of barrels of bourbon continued their slow transformation. Time and oak turning raw spirit into something smooth and valuable. Not unlike people, I thought. Time and experience, if we're willing to learn, turning us into better versions of ourselves. "Come on," I said, standing. Clara made pot roast for dinner. She expects all of us at the main house. "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan said, taking Victoria's hand. We walked together across the estate grounds. 3 generations of lessons learned and still being learned. The house lights glowed warm ahead of us. Caroline would have loved this, I thought. Would have loved seeing our son finally understand what she'd tried to teach him all along. That wealth isn't measured in money or property or what others think of you. It's measured in character, in relationships, in work that matters and family that stays. And as we reached the main house, where Clara waited with dinner and the staff had become our extended family, I felt Caroline's presence like a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We did good, love," I whispered. "He's going to be okay." The evening breeze carried the scent of aging bourbon from the warehouses, that distinctive sweetness that meant something valuable was being created through patience and time. Just like my son, just like all of us, if we're willing to do the work. I smiled and followed Ethan and Victoria inside, grateful for second chances and the wisdom to recognize what truly matters. Home wasn't the house they'd asked me to leave. It wasn't even this estate with its distillery and land. Home was this, family learning to be better, together, and that was worth more than all the bourbon in the world.